Alright, so in this video I'm gonna try to go over some main concepts of Google Sheets API. Mainly I'll be using Node.js to interact with it. So this will be specifically Node.js Google Sheets API tutorial. Now, if you want to be following along, you're gonna need a few pieces of software installed. One of those is Node.js. So you can install it by going to nodejs.org, and you can just download the recommended or latest version. Both should be fine, and install it on your machine. It should be available both for Windows or Mac. The other piece of software I'm going to use is a text editor. For that, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, and you can find that at code.visualstudio.com. That's the website. You can download it and install it. Again, available both Windows, Mac. You can install it on both. Once all of that done, you need a Google account with Google Sheets. So basically I have this spreadsheet. It's an empty spreadsheet. There's nothing on it right now, as you can see. So on my machine, I have made a folder called Sheets-API-project. It's an empty folder, as you can see. Now I'm gonna make this folder my project folder in my Visual Studio Code. So I'm gonna go to Visual Studio Code software, click on open folder, or you can go file, open, it's the same thing. I'm gonna go open folder, and I'm gonna basically just navigate to that folder. So hit open, it should open that folder, which is empty right now. So if you need a little more help with installation of Node.js and Visual Studio Code, I have a tutorial with Excel and Node.js, and I go a little more in depth with the installation and all of it. I'm not gonna repeat all of that again. Please watch that tutorial if you need more help with this installation of the software. Now, once this is all done, I'm gonna open my integrated terminal, and you can go on top here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but on top there's this menu, and you can basically go under view and open the terminal. And that should open integrated terminal within Visual Studio Code. Now, the first thing we need to do, since this is gonna be a Node.js project, we're gonna basically just initialize a Node.js application here really quickly. And we can do that by running npm init. And it's gonna basically ask us for the package name. I'm just gonna leave it default, whatever it is. Version, description, entry point, anything is fine. I'm gonna change it to main.js. And enter, basically yes. So that should basically create our package.json file. That's fine. Now, once we have this, the next thing is to install Google Sheets API package for Node.js. So for that, I'm gonna move to Sheets API documentation. See, there is the command npm install and this. So I'm gonna just copy and paste that. That's fine. Go back to Visual Studio Code, paste it in my integrated terminal, and hit enter. That should run this installation and install the package we need. There are wrappers available for Google Sheets that are supposed to make it easier to do the whole calls and everything else. I'm not going to use any of those wrappers. I'm just going to use the original package from Google. The reason for that, first of all, I have some pretty bad experience with some of these packages because as they change to different versions of API, they discontinue a lot of these packages and they don't support it anymore. So for that reason, it's probably best to go to the source. It's going to be a little harder to start maybe, but then it's less headaches. And then number two, I don't need an extra package, so this works for me. So we have this. Now I'm going to create a file, which would be a JavaScript file to write our scripts. I'm going to create a new file here by rolling over here, new, And the file is going to be main.js, which is, if you remember, that was the entry point. I did. Good. That's our JavaScript file. We have it ready. Now we can start coding. The first thing we need to do in this application, we need to make sure we import the package we just installed. So for that, I'm going to do const Google, and that is going to be equal to require and the name of the package, and for that is going to be Google APIs, and see how it shows up there. Good. So this const is basically, you can think about it as var if you're not familiar with this. So basically we're declaring a variable like that. In newer JavaScript, there is new ways to declare variables. One of those is const. So basically that means it's a constant variable. It cannot be changed. So I'm going to leave it at that for now and move on to doing some extra setup. So the next piece of setup, actually I'm going to put the links here so you can hopefully see. So the things I did so far, I went to nodejs.org. That's one of the things we've used here. The second thing I did is Visual Studio Code. And again, you can use any text editor. Honestly, I just like this one. And finally, the last thing you need to do is go to, by the way, the link for this documentation. Let me put that there too. And finally, the last piece you're gonna need is going to Google's Developers Console. So you don't need to type this whole thing here the way I have it on top. Where you need to go, I'm just gonna copy the link and put it on the screen so you can see where you need to go. So you need to go to this console.developers.google.com, and that will take you to your Developers Console. Now in this Developers Console, you need to create a project to basically give you some keys so you can connect to Google Sheets API. I'm not sure how it shows up the first time you open this if you've never done it. It would probably look very similar to this. So you need to find this option to create a new project, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to click there. You want to name this project with some unique name. I'm going to call it NodeJS GS API test. So once I have that, I go ahead and click create. Apparently that was too many characters, so I'm gonna remove, click create. That's gonna create that project. It may sometimes take a little bit. In the meantime, when you actually look at some of these examples that Google documentation provides, all these examples usually work with this system of basically connecting and authenticating yourself by using the regular method when the user is going to grant permission for a spreadsheet. And that's not really what I'm looking for in this. I just want to connect to my own spreadsheet, make some changes to it, pull some data and add some information to it. It doesn't seem like there is a lot of documentation. Maybe I'm not good at finding it. Now, by this time, hopefully this is done. So see, it finished that. So I'm going to open that, click on that project. It should now show that project name here on top. Now in this project, we want to enable the APIs we're going to need. So I'm going to scroll down, see this explore and enable APIs. Now keep in mind this UI for this changes a lot. So it might not be here next time when you try this. So try to find where you enable the API. So I'm going to click enable, see enable API and services. And then it's going to ask me which API I would like to enable. So you can scroll through this whole thing. See, there it is, Google Sheets API. If you couldn't find it, you can just search here like Google Sheets. Pretty sure that will show up. There it is. Then you click on Google Sheets API, and here you're going to click enable. So that will enable Google Sheets API for this project. Enabling is not enough. You have to create credentials so you can actually connect and make some changes. So I'm going to do that, create credentials. this is what's going to show up. So we're going to choose the API we're using. So Google Sheets API. Where are we going to be calling this from? So for us, it's going to be web server, which is like NodeJS, that example. That's good. So we're going to be doing application data belonging to our own application. Finally, are we planning to use it for this? No. So that's good. I'm going to click on this. Now it's going to ask us for the service account. So this is going to basically create a service account. And what a service account is, basically, it's just some sort of like email account that it creates that you give permissions to do some things on your spreadsheets or some other applications. In this case, it's going to be our spreadsheet. So we're going to create a name for this service account. Any name, you just type something. So I'm going to do service man 11. And then the key type that we're going to download, you're going to download the key with your credentials. It's going to be JSON. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and click continue. Oh, by the way, we have to select the role. So when you select the role for this project, you're going to decide what type of permissions you're going to need for this script. So if you just want to read information, then it's going to be basically a viewer. If we want to be able to change data, we're going to do edit. And then if you want to have full access, it's going to be owner. For this, I think editor should be fine. So I'm going to do editor. That's good enough. I'm going to click continue. And what that's going to do is going to download a JSON file. See, this shows up. It says, this is the file. Do you want to open it? I'm just going to click save file. That will download the JSON file with all the credentials. So once that file is downloaded, you want to go ahead and move that file to the same folder where your project is located. So in my case, see, this is Visual Studio Code. So you want to move it to the same folder for this project we had. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. This is that folder. See, now we have some files in there. I'm going to go grab that from my downloads and copy that over. So there's that file with a crazy name. I'm going to actually rename that, call it keys. Now, this file contains all the credentials for you to be able to connect and do changes. So you want to make sure that this file is saved. You don't share the information in this file or the file itself. So if you're doing some sort of web application, make sure that this is stored in a safe location so people cannot access the file. Otherwise, they're going to be able to see all the credentials and be able to modify and read your spreadsheets too. So for me, I copied that over. There's that keys.json file. So now we need to put that information to our application. And the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to create another constant. I'm going to call it keys. That's just a variable name. And again, I'm going to require. So I need to require this file that's located in the same folder as where my application is, this one. So for that, I'm going to do dot, that's the current folder. And this actually needs to be as string. So dot, that's my current folder. And in the current folder, I want not the folder over here. I want the file. So the file is keys.json. Now, once we have our keys, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create client. It's a good enough name. And I'm going to create a new. So that's now going to be coming from this library right here. So Google dot, and we're going to get under off and dot. And here there is this, see, just JWT, which I believe stands for Json Web Tokens. So we're going to do that. So to create this Json Web Token, see, if I open parentheses, it gives me email, the string, then the key file string, then the key string, and then scopes, which is like an array right here. So the first thing is the email. To make this easier, I'm just going to send this to a new line like this. Let's do semicolon to finish this off. Now, all of that is going to be coming mainly from this keys file. And if you open that keys file, you'll see what your credentials are. and all of that information. For me, I'm going to keep it, like I said, safe. I don't want you to see it, but you should be able to open your JSON file and see what's going on in there. So out of that keys, if I do keys dot client email is one of those, comma, the second thing, so let me just go back so you can see there was the email. The second thing is the key file string. For that, we just not gonna pass anything, so I'm gonna say null. So the third thing is the key itself, that's the third argument, and then finally the scopes, and the rest we're gonna skip. So the third thing was the key. So the key is the private key, so you do key dot and private key, which is going to be again coming from that JSON file. And finally, the last thing is the scopes you want, and that's going to be an array of scopes. And basically this is what things do you need permissions for. I'm actually going to send all of this stuff to a new line to make this a little prettier, like this. And the scopes we're going to need, in my case, I'm going to read and write to sheets. Let me actually get you the documentation for scopes. So here it is. So that's scopes. I'm going to copy that link and add it to this. So hopefully you'll be able to see that in a larger font. So that's the link where I go for scopes. Back to it. So we can access a lot of different Google stuff. For me, I want Google Sheets, so I'll just quickly search here. There it is, Google Sheets API. And see the scopes we can require. We can require access to Google Drive. I don't want to actually manage and delete and edit the files in this case. And I don't want to do this too, so I don't want to download the Drive files. What I do want to do, I want to see, edit, create, delete your spreadsheets. That I do. So that's one. So if you only just want to read data from the spreadsheet, but you don't want to write anything back to the spreadsheet, this would be enough. So for me, I want to read and write. So that would be what I need. So I'm going to copy that, go back, and for scopes, it's going to be basically that as string. So I'm going to pass that to this array, save. So that's going to create this Json Web Token or whatever it's called, which is great. So now after we create that token, we should be able to try to connect and see if we can actually establish a successful connection. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. I'm going to create that variable client we just made. And on this, there is going to be, see this method authorize. So that's good. I'm going to open that. And that is going to basically accept a callback function. So the function is going to be this and semicolon to finish this line, send this. Now this function is going to accept a couple of arguments. One is the error. The other one is the actual tokens you're going to get. So what happens when you connect to Google Sheets with your credentials, what you get is a token that gives you access. And usually it's like a temporary for some period of time, and then you have to renew it to get it to work again. So for me, in this particular case, I don't really want to use these tokens, but if you wanted to get those tokens, you could. Maybe I'll leave it here, but I'm not going to use it, so that's fine. First, we want to make sure there are no errors. So if I check if there are any errors, so first we're going to do an if statement to just make sure there are no errors in this. So if there's an error, we'll just log the error. So console log is app scripts equivalent to logger log. It's just much better than logger log, but doesn't matter. So that's console log. And then I want to just return out of this. Return basically will just get us out of this function at that point and not run the rest of this. So that should check if there's an error, we just log the error, we get out of it. Otherwise, we want to do what we want to do. So basically the else statement is going to be if we're hopefully successfully connected. Let's just check this. So I'm going to do console log and I'm going to say connected. So if we get that, that means that our connection was successful. So I'm going to run this. So to run this, we go to our terminal again, and the application we have is called main.js. So to run that, I'm going to do node space and then the name of the file, main.js. So I'm going to hit enter, and I got an error. So key is not defined. So let's go see here. Where's the key? Oh, see, this should have been keys, not key, which is this thing right here. Okay, hopefully I didn't make any other errors in my typing. So I'm going to run this again and see, it says connected. That's good news. After we connect to it, we should be able to do some actions. So for example, read data from our spreadsheet. So for that, I'm going to do it in a separate function. And to basically have less callback stuff, I'm going to use an async function. Now, if you don't know what async function is, just don't worry about it and go with this. So otherwise, that's more benefit if you do understand what async functions are. So we do async function. I'm going to call this GS run. And for this, I'm going to do this. So this function needs these credentials to be able to run. So once we're able to establish this connection through this client right here, and basically just make sure we're connected, we need that client to be able to run all our Google Sheets commands. So that means we need to pass that to this. So I'm going to say CL, short for client. So in here, we're going to do all the steps that we're going to do with our spreadsheet. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a constant. I'm going to create this constant and call it GS. That will be our, actually GS API would be great. So I'm going to do that. And for this, we're going to again go back to that Google variable. And inside of this, there is Sheets. And this is where we're actually connecting to Google Sheets API. So we need to pass an object here. And that object needs to have a couple of things. One thing it needs to have is the version of API we're planning to use. So the version we're going to be using is version 4. So I'm going to do v4 as the version. And the second parameter is going to be the client that we were able to connect. So that's going to be the auth. So that's going to be actually this CL, this client will be passing to this function. And the way we'll be passing that to that function is here. So once we're connected, after we're connected here, we'll be calling that function GSRun right there. And we'll be passing the client from here to here. So that will pass that client over here, and that will be here as well. And that will hopefully establish the connection to our Google Sheets API version 4. Once we have established the connection, we should be able to now run some commands to get some information from our spreadsheet. So I'm going to create another constant here and call this one OPT for options, I suppose. It's good enough. So that will be an object. And this object needs to have some pieces of information. I'm going to do it like this because it's going to be quite a few of them. So one is the spreadsheet ID. So the spreadsheet ID will be connecting to. So I'm going to go back to here, go to my spreadsheet, find the ID. So the ID is going to be everything after this D slash and going all the way until the slash here. So I'm going to copy that ID for my spreadsheet, go back here and paste, comma. The next argument I'm going to need, I want the range from which I'm getting this information. And that's a string range in A1 notation. So first, let me actually add some information here. So now if I want to get this information from here, the range is from A1 through B5. And that range is coming from data tab. So A1 through B5. Let's remember that. Go back to this. So the range is going to be data tab, exclamation sign, just like you would do in Excel or Google Sheets, and A1 through B5. We're going to see if that's enough to get our information. Maybe we need to pass more parameters here, but that's going to be the options I'm going to need, the spreadsheet ID and the range. Now, to be able to get all of this, now I need to use this connection to my Google Sheets API. So I'm going to go JS API dot, and here, see, we have the spreadsheets. And in the spreadsheets, I want to get values from that spreadsheet, not sheets. I'm going to get values. And that has all of these, see, different methods. So we can get values, we can update values, we can do batch get values, batch update. So a bunch of different things. We can append. We want to, in this case, get. And that get is going to be accepting that parameters, which is this options. So I'm going to pass it right there. So that's going to return something. Now, when you make calls to an API, because it's an external service, we don't know how long it's going to get us to get that information back, because it's probably going to take some time to make the request. It may be not too long. It could be like a little milliseconds, but still, it's going to take some time. So we need to wait until we get that information back. And this was the whole reason of using an async function, because if I use an async function, I can have the new notation of doing await and wait until it's done. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to await until that's done. And when it's done, I'm going to store that information that comes from it in a variable. I'm going to call it var data. And as a matter of fact, instead of var, I'm going to use the new way of declaring this let. And I'm not going to talk about let and differences between var and let. You can explore it on your own. Just think about this is the same as var. Okay, so that will basically just wait until this call is done and we get the information back, and then it's going to come back in this data variable. So at that point, let me just console log that to see what's in there. Do we even get anything back or not? So I'm going to console log the data variable right here, save this and run. Go back here, up arrow key to type the same node space main.js, which is the name of the file, hit run. I think something went wrong here, so let's go and take a look. So it says unhandled warning, missing required parameters, spreadsheet ID. So spreadsheet ID apparently should have been with an uppercase I. Okay. Save that. I'm going to try this again. Go back and run, and hopefully this time it will be better. Okay, something is still wrong. I'm going to go back and see. So it says the caller does not have permission. And the reason for that is when we made that JSON, see, it made us this email address, if you remember. And I should be able to get to it if I go back here, manage service accounts. See, there is that email, serviceman11, and that whole crazy thing after that. So I'm going to copy that email. And the reason I'm going to need that, I need that email because I have to give permission to that email to read and access and edit the spreadsheet. So for that, I'm going to go to the spreadsheet and share that spreadsheet. And I'm going to share it with that email, which is that service account. So I'm going to do this. And if I wanted to be able to edit it, I will also grant it can edit permission. Send. That should give permission to that account to be able to read and edit this file. So now let's go back and rerun exactly the same thing. See what we get this time. So I'm going to go back here, up arrow and run. And this time it seems like we didn't get an error. So status 200 means no error. Okay. So if we scroll up, we should be able to get some things. We got whatever this is. This is the, basically it gives us some information about this. And then we get the range from which we're getting this data. And then it says values. To get to that values, we need to get to this data. And that data, I think, is on the top level of this object. So if we do data, and apparently we call this data, and that is data too, which is kind of going to be confusing, but it's still going to be data.values. So let's do that and save and rerun this to see what we get. See what I got as a result of this log? I get the information from my spreadsheet. Now, I probably don't want to get this first thing over here. I want to start from A2 through B5. So I'm going to go back to this and change my range A2 through B5. Save it and rerun this script. And now we should get an array of our data from our spreadsheet. So what I want to do now, I want to write some information back to that spreadsheet. So maybe I'll take all of this and change it up a little bit and then put it back in a spreadsheet, or maybe not put it back over these values, but put it back someplace over here. Let's do that. So I'm going to go back here. First of all, this is going to be an array. So let me just save it in a variable so we don't have to deal with this 15 dots. So I'm going to say let data array equal to that. So that data array, now it's basically an array. So because it's an array, we can use all array methods on that. One of those would be map array method. And this map method will accept a callback function. And that function, for each time, it's going to be a new row. Now the map method is going to return a new array. So I'm going to say let new data array equal to this. And I'm not going to do anything meaningful. Basically, this is supposed to just show you how we deal with API, not how we deal with data. So now we're going to take that array and we're going to change it up. So I'm going to just simply take that and maybe I'll add like third concatenated column in the end, which will be the ID dash the name. So for that, I will basically have to return something. So what I'm going to return is basically whatever the current array is, which is going to be every time it's going to be one of these. So it's going to be first time it's going to be 1 and Anna, right? And then to that, I'm going to concatenate. Actually, I'm just going to push because that's going to make it easier because I need just one. So I'm going to push to add to the end our 0, which will be the value from this first column. And then I'm going to add a dash. And then I'm going to add our 1, which is the name. That will be our push. Now, this our push is not going to return the array, so I need to do an extra step here. So I'm going to do let, I'm going to call this temp data equal to this. Actually, we don't need to create that variable because we can just push that to that array and then we can just return the R. That should just work. So just to make sure I did this correctly, I'm just going to console log that new data array to make sure we did the right conversion there. Save that, go back and run this script. Yep, so that just made the third column with our concatenated values. So once I have this third column, I don't want to console log anymore. I just want to put that array back to the spreadsheet. And I could have done it over here to override it, but I'm just going to put it on the side over here someplace. For that, we're going to go back to this. Now, if we're trying to communicate with our spreadsheet again, we have to do through the API. And this time we're going to be updating information. And for updates, the objects you're going to have to pass are a little more complicated than you do for gets. So for gets, we just do spreadsheet ID and the range. We're good to go. Now for updates, there's going to be a few more pieces we need to add in addition to that. But we still have to do those two. So I'm just going to copy this, paste that. Now I'm going to call it update options. And we still need the spreadsheet ID. We need to provide the range. Now, the nice thing about this API is that if I want to put my data here in the spreadsheet, I don't have to say E2 through G something and figure out how many columns and rows. All you have to do is just provide the starting cell and it will just figure out how to put your array here. So I'm just going to say E2 and that's it. So data spreadsheet, worksheet is data and E2 cell. So that is fine. It's the same spreadsheet ID. If you were trying to do this on another spreadsheet, you want to make sure you give that spreadsheet and share that with that email account too. But for me, I'm going to do the range, the ID. But now we need a couple of other things. One, you have this parameter that is required, which is called value, I think input options. Option. I hope I remember that right, but we'll find out when it gives us the error. So there are a few different ways we can interpret that information. So the most common way you're going to do this is basically user entered. So basically, I think there's row is another version of this, but basically we just want to interpret the values we're entering as if somebody was typing that in the spreadsheet like this. And then finally, the last thing, which is an important one, is the response. So this response in its turn, it's going to be an object again. And one of those things in that object is going to be the values, which is going to be array you're passing to that. So the array we're passing to that is going to be this new data array. So that's going to be the options. Now, once we got these options together, we should be able now to call our API and enter that data. And to call our API, we're going to go back to this JS API thing. Dot and spreadsheets dot. And again, values is what we're changing. Dot. And this time, instead of get, I'm going to do an update. And for this update, we're going to pass the parameters, which is going to be this update options from here. Now, again, this is an API call. Every time you do an API call, it's going to take time for it to do something and get your results back. So that means we have to do a wait for this. And we're going to create a variable. We're going to say let. So I'm going to say response. Maybe we call it res short equals to that. And then we'll probably just console log the response to see what response we get. But honestly, if this works, then it should be updating our data already. So that response will just verify that it worked or it didn't work. So we'll save it. So now if I go back and rerun this, and we got an error again. So it says invalid JSON response values. Didn't type response right, did I? There it is, response. So let's go back and rerun this. Hopefully I didn't mistype anything else. Well, maybe I did. So let's go check. Apparently it's not response again. I'll have to go check what it's supposed to be. Give me 1 second. So let's see, reference. So that was update. Here we go. And this update, we can do value input options and request body, which is going to be a value range. And that's going to be a resource. Okay, so go change that, resource, save this, go back and rerun that. Okay, so we got OK response. That means we should be successful with our call. I'm going to go back and take a look at our spreadsheet. So here we go. So we're able to write that information back to our spreadsheet by doing that. Now, one thing I want to mention here, which is kind of weird, see how I mapped through this data by the position in my array. Now, let me show you something. So the way that Google, this API returns information. So let's say one of these things was blank. There's a good chance that if I run this, my code is going to give me an error. Well, apparently it did not. So let's actually go check what we got. So, so we got undefined. See? So let me actually clear that and run that. That will make probably a little more sense for you. Or it will make sense once I explain what's going on here. But here, see, basically it did 3, and then in the next cell it did 3- undefined. And what's going on here is, for whatever weird reason, they decided that when you get data that has blanks, so let's just console log this data array. I don't want to log this right now. I don't think we're logging anything else. That should be good enough. I'm going to save it and run. So see, when I get this back, what I get is 1 Anna, 2 Joe, and 3, and there is no blank. So it doesn't give the blank as one of those. And for that reason, when I'm trying to access that, it's giving me undefined, because I'm trying to access that position in this array that doesn't exist by doing this R1. For that reason, because you're not going to be able to probably control how people enter this and whether you have blanks or not, you will have to add some handling. One of the ways, you could just make sure that you basically just fill up these blanks and make sure that it's 2 columns all the time, even though it's not 2 columns here when you get this return data. So the way to convert our data to 2-column sort of data, we can map our data again. So I'm going to say that data array, and I'm going to map that, and I'm going to create another array out of it. And this array will hopefully have all those blanks that I'm going to need. And I'm going to save it back to the same data array. So that should be fine. And then we'll just console log that after this transformation to make sure that what we did actually worked. So for each row, I suppose that's what we'll call this, R, we're going to take that, and we need to basically make sure that it's 2 columns long in this case. So as long as it's not 2 columns, we need to keep adding, pushing spaces in the end. So the way we're going to do that, we're going to say while, we'll create a little while loop here. And I'm going to say while r.length, which is going to be the number of things in here, is less than, in this case, 2, because I want 2-column layout. While it's less than 2, we're going to take the R and we're going to push a blank. So you can do a null, but in Sheets, usually it treats like empty, this double quotes as the space or blank. So I'm going to push that to it. So I'm saying while the number of things we have in here is less than 2, like in here, it's going to be just 1. I'm going to say push the thing to the end. So there's going to be adding another element, a blank. And if both of them are blank, then it's going to check and it's going to be basically 0. And it's going to take that and add once, and then it's going to check it's going to be 1. So then it's going to do it again until it gets 2 blanks. So this way, while we'll keep doing it until it gets enough spaces so it adds the columns. So I'm going to push that, and then I'm finally going to just return that final R. So let's save this, and I'm going to rerun it to see what I get. See, now that adds that blank here, which means for the rest of the script, Save this. Let's go back and look at our spreadsheet. See, now it does this blank where it was supposed to be, and then 3 dash and the blank goes in here. So we have less of this weird effect. So basically just be careful with that, because that's the way it's gonna bring over. Now keep in mind that if you have like 3 columns data like this, and you have blank in the middle, it will bring over this blank. It's only just this trailing blanks in the end that it's basically just gonna skip. And I think that covers pretty much what we need to cover. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.